That was very disruptive, Filippo. Um, catching me a little bit on the hop, but I'm very grateful to Maria Carmo, actually, because I think what Maria Carmo has done, is shifted the debate. I get increasingly nervous in debates which talk about impact investment, because this is not only a capital story. This is actually an economy story. And the word economy is key. I think we've increasingly talking about the allocation of capital, the 150 million euros, the 600 million pounds in big society capital. But actually, that is just capital. In order to make that capital sustainable, you have to create new revenue flows. You have to create new value in the system. And that is a fundamental component of the story. And in a sense, that can only be unlocked, as David was saying, and as Maria said, through reorganizing collective impact and collective outcomes, finding new values in real stories. I'll give you a practical example. So, a housing association invested in the housing stock of an area, improving the energy performance. They thought it would give people more disposable income, better food, other things. Actually, they found there was no more disposable income. They looked more at what happened. People went from living at 13 degrees to 18 degrees centigrade. Where was the money saved? The money was saved in the health service. Now, intuitively, everyone here gets this, right? It's no big issue. But actually, corporately, through a governance, actually how our sectors are organized, that's incredibly difficult to get. It is incredibly difficult for a housing association and a health authority to make a new deal. That is what we're talking about. We're talking about increasing recognition that we live in systems with interdependency. And the interdependency has to be valid in the financing, in the revenue side. So I'm very grateful that Maria Carmo said this is the word economy. We have to be bold enough to recognize this is an economy that's being grown. Secondly, and I think it's very important, why civic? I think why civic for me, and I again referred, it has to be many actors. The responsibility of this cannot be allocated to one actor, the NGOs, or the private. Let's see the initiatives. In India, we have a new CSR bill where 2% of net profits will go on CSR. Just to put this in figures for you, that is 1.5 times big society capital every year. Every year, in perpetuity. Huge money flows. So private, why are they doing it? Most of this money is going to be redirected to sustainable supply chains, because they recognize the sustainability of business is reliant on actually building sustainable supply chains. The growth of distressed assets is a key issue for corporates. Then the contribution of other people. Associations. I'm so delighted that we have the Monsignore here, because in a sense, I think the Holy Father, when he came out and said the role of finance for social good is super important. But simultaneously, it is the role of everyone who has assets, human assets, us as individuals, but also assets, buildings, capacity, to contribute, to make sure of their social usefulness. Somebody gave me a great example. He sort of said to me, what would happen if you had to show the usefulness of your assets you held in order to maintain them, in order to keep them? So you cannot just hoard assets. I believe in historic times, hoarding money was seen as an ill. Hoarding assets, we have to put them to use. So I think this is a contribution of many, many people, whether it's the public sector, the private sector, us as citizens contributing our side. And for me, the fundamental point of this is the social economy as it's being born must not be restricted. And forgive me, I have nothing against JP Morgan, but it must not be restricted to just, and I use the word carefully, just big private capital. It must create an opportunity for the democratization of capital. It must embrace every citizen being able to invest in this new social economy. Why? Because it renews our social contract. It is about the enfranchisement of everyone in this new possibility. So, but this presents real challenges, right? And I think it's absolutely right what was being said earlier. There are real innovation challenges. We don't know how to do governance of systems. We can do corporate governance, but we struggle to deal with governance of multiple corporates and systems. We don't know how to deal with this. Outcome financing and outcome financing is currently just thought of as a method of mitigating risk. It's not. Outcome financing is a method to allow for innovation which is relevant to the context, relevant to Fundão, relevant to Villarreal. Right? It is not about the idea of a state at the center, because a state cannot have enough knowledge to know what is the right activities. It's not a lack of capacity, it's just not possible. Because in a rapidly changing world, in a highly dynamic world, it is impossible for any centralized idea to be able to know what activities are relevant in those towns and villages and cities. So outcome financing creates the space for innovation which is relevant. And this is an exploration, we're just beginning. So, on one hand, we have a challenge of governance, which we don't know yet. Two, we have to create the frameworks of outcomes in ways that we haven't really invented. And I think three, and I think Maria Carmo said this very clearly, this has to be a movement of change. Why? Because we live in something which is very precious, called a democracy, where no single person can drive change, though the capital holders may try to. They can't. We live in a multi-stakeholder world where many, many actors only together can drive the level of change we want to see. We have to embrace this complexity, not run away from it, not try to hide away from it, but actually embrace this multi-stakeholder reality. And that is why things like movements are very important. Movements are about organizing people with shared missions to drive change. So, in my view, I think first I will sum up, and thank you for catching me on the hop, Filippo, but this notion of the civic economy, just those words, are enough for us to think more fundamentally about the conversation that's being asked of us and the values that we have to bring to the table. I think it's extraordinary to see the actual representation on this podium and also in this audience. And that is absolutely relevant. It cannot be done by just one aspect. I'm honored to be here, and thank you, Maria, and everyone else.